Hi, and welcome to VIBEZ Daily. This is a daily devotional curated by VIBEZ Church to help you practice the way of Jesus and be all that God has called you to be. You have joined us for our year-long series titled Devoted. Acts 2:42 tells us that the followers of Jesus were devoted to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to breaking of bread, and to prayer. This podcast was created to provide context and commentary for what you read each day. Just before our friends begin discussing today's reading, we want to invite you not only for fellowship, but for prayer as well. We have created the Vibe Daily Chat group to offer you fellowship and a community where you can state your observations, ask questions about the reading or the podcast. You can join us by downloading the VIBEZ Church app in your favorite app store. Click Join the Conversation and join us today. And finally, we hope that you can join us for prayer. Prayer happens Monday through Friday, and more information on that can be found on the VIBEZ Church app under prayer. Now, let's begin our conversation on today's reading.
All right. Welcome back to the VIBEZ Daily podcast. It is day 117. We are so excited to have you back with us. I am joined by my wife, Victoria, picking up where she and Shay left off this week in First Chronicles. And here to bring this conversation to a close. This particular week's worth of reading, 3 more chapters. I believe we have 12, 13, and 14 that we need to complete this week. And so excited to do that. I really encourage what you guys have shared with us this week. So thank you for all of that. But yeah, left off here at David really being anointed king again. And, you know, just kind of this particular version of that account of how he kind of became king. And, you know, interestingly enough, because this is the perspective of essentially the line of Judah's or kings of Judah, I should say. I feel like there's a little bit more of a just focus on David's part in this. But we pick up here in chapter 12, and it really just kind of starts with, you know, the people who kind of had David's back, who were, you know, the first to really kind of elevate him and support him as king specifically. What did you find interesting here in chapter 12?
Let's say verse 2.
Okay.
Let me start there. So verse 2, I thought it was interesting because we all have heard now up to this point that like David killed Goliath with a sling, right? And so I don't know how often they talk about the different things that they like use during the war, and then like swords and stuff, and every now and then you hear about bowmen and stuff. But I think I love how they also pointed out that like there were bowmen and could shoot arrows and sling stones. And so the slinging of the stones to me was one of the things that stuck out as like one of their tactics of war. They said either with the right or the left hand. This was the Benjaminites, and so I just thought it was really interesting that like this was a thing like back then. And one of the things, of course, that probably them and David like practiced over and over and over and over. It was like really good. It was like a really like popular skill, you know, to have. And so that's the first thing that stepped out to me.
I mean, my version say bowman, it says
Archers, come on.
You know, gotta shout out the archers in the Bible. I mean, it's not necessary, of course, but
the kids be like, we in the Bible, mommy.
We are in the Bible. Archers, we're there. I have no idea how to use a bow and arrow though, but
no,
I should learn. I guess it's in my name. But yeah, I mean, it's funny because it goes back to I don't know if you recall in Judges when there was one of the judges, he was left-handed specifically. I think it's Ehud, maybe. Don't quote me on that, but it's the one that stabbed the guy in the stomach. He was kind of the heavy-set dude.
Oh yeah, and the sword got lost.
But the big deal was he was left-handed, right? And so that's why it was such a big deal. But he was a Benjamite, and so like they were known kind of for having so many left-handed, you know, people who could use with their left hand or work with their left hand more so than the other tribes, which is again just ironic because Benjamin means son of my right hand, so it's just kind of like ironic in that. But that was very interesting that they kind of point that out. And then of course, they kind of start running through some of the chiefs and leaders among those warriors specifically. That was the tribe of Benjamin. You also had some Gadites.
Gadites, I like that. But they
Right.
pointed these out.
Yeah, some Gadites that had also kind of gone to support David specifically.
I like the description of them, right? Their faces were like the faces of lions and who were swift as gazelles upon the mountains. I love that they point out like how each tribe here like had these special unique things and how they were expert with the shield and the spear. And what it reminded me of is though that the Lord kind of like equipped his people for that time, right? Like, so we talk about like gifting, spiritual giftings, things the Lord's giving you, equips you with. It seems like in this day and age, like this is what the tribe of Israel needed, like warriors in this way to fulfill his missions, right?
Yeah.
And to do what he's called them to do. And like, it just makes me wonder and think like, okay, well, what are the gifts that he's giving us today? Like, what are the things, like, what's the thing that like we're supposed to be utilizing right now to accomplish his will, like today?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I mean, I think it's also important to keep in mind, like, of course, you talked about kind of some of the things that made them unique, but one of the things that just jumped out is, you know, obviously these particular tribes are coming to support David, but you know, them specifically addressing the Benjamites is kind of also somewhat a big deal, because that is the tribe that Saul came from specifically, right? And as we'll start to see as you continue to read through Chronicles, not next week, but even the week after, I think, as we start to kind of get through some of the kings specifically, or as we just saw going through Kings, it was unusual for like a king to kind of rise up that wasn't the son of the king, if that makes sense, right? Like, I mean, particularly obviously in Judah specifically was always from the same lineage, but even in the kings of Israel, it was, the default was like the son, unless there was something, you know,
Conspiracy.
Unusual that happened. And so I think it was still a big deal because for them, I imagine the expectation was always that like a Jonathan or somebody would become the next king, and it would stay with the tribe of Benjamin. And so for him to kind of take some of that allegiance and that loyalty, even from the tribe from which Saul came, I think was something that was significant as well.
Yeah, definitely. And even like you said, like the fact that happened and then people are still so supportive of David, like it just showed God's will being done here. Because like in verse 22 it says from day to day men came to David to help him until there's a great army, like an army of God. And you see this support because at first when David was on the run, it was the riffraff, right? It was the outcasts, it was the people, you know, his family members, it was the people who like, you know, were struggling. But like now we even see like the rest of Israel getting behind David and joining him, even though it didn't stay with, like you said, in the tribe of Benjamin, that it wasn't Saul's lineage.
Good. Anything else kind of in these first couple tribes? So Benjamin, Gad, Manasseh, kind of before we get to 23 and talk a little bit more about some of these soldiers that were with him in Hebron. Anything else kind of in that first section there?
The only thing that stuck out to me again was the fact that when these people started to come to him, he asked them in like verse 17, like, hey, like, have you come in friendship? Like, are you come in peace? But he left if they weren't, he left it in God's hand, because he says that may the God of our fathers see and rebuke you. Like if you are like trying to come and do wrong to me, it wasn't like well, let me get you or let me rebuke you, right? Like I love that, like continuously we see, as much as David is a warrior, as much as he has this 30 around him and these bad like men around, like they could take out anybody that they want at this point. But the fact that he continues to choose to let God seek his own revenge is really cool.
That's good. I'm glad you called out that particular passage too, or that verse, because I think one of the things that I'm often challenged with is like having confidence in knowing that like something is of God, or that like he's like ordained something or spoke or directed, you know, in some
Yeah.
way, right? Or ordered something. And like I feel like what I see from David is like he's not sure really
Yeah.
kind of what side they're on, you know?
Yeah.
And so like it's not a clear God told me you guys are for me,
Yeah.
right? Or God told me you're not. But more so like I think this could be for my benefit. Like I in wisdom maybe, or through some other, you know, ideas or leanings, I'm leaning towards this. But if you betrayed me, like if this is not that, right? I know I can trust God to judge between you and me. Like
Yeah.
I know I can trust him to be in control of this. And I think like there are gonna be plenty of situations in our life where it's not so clear.
Yeah.
Like what God expects or desires, right? And direction. And sometimes we just have to have the confidence, right? That like, hey, this is the best choice. I'm not positive it's the right choice, but I feel like it's the best choice. And I'm just gonna trust that God is in control and will like fill in the gaps, right? Like he'll, if this isn't for my good, he'll judge accordingly, right? But I'm doing it with the best of intentions and the best of heart. And I think like that's kind of what that says to me, is that like David didn't seem to be clear. Like he was just kind of like, hey, I think so. And then, oh yeah, Amasai kind of says like we're with you and all this, but like still there was enough doubt in his mind of like maybe I'm making a mistake welcoming you guys into my, you know, as a warrior essentially. So you know, that was interesting.
That's good.
Yeah. But we keep moving into chapter 12, kind of the middle here, and it's kind of just some numbers here that they point out for like some of the troops that are with David. And these are individuals who kind of come to him to essentially turn over Saul's kingdom to David, kind of give him, you know, control in that regard. And they kind of give us a bunch of numbers specifically. Anything that just jumped out to you as they kind of go through these tribes and talk about some of these armed troops that were specifically tasked to turn over the kingdom to David?
Yeah. Not too much. Just first of all, I love they started out with Judah. You know, tribe of Judah is first up. Like here we are, as we mentioned time and time again.
I mean, they're a little biased in this particular case.
Yeah,
you
no,
know,
definitely.
some of the other writers may not have been. This particular
This
writer
one-
is going to be biased.
Yeah,
okay?
for sure.
They care about Judah over all else.
Oh yeah, I definitely. I think it was interesting. They kind of like this tribe of Issachar here, like men who had understanding of the times to know what Israel ought to do. 20 chiefs and all their kinsmen under their command. I think that was just like interesting that stuck out, like that they felt the need to put that in there. So I was like, that's interesting. That these were like, you know, like kind of like wise men here.
Yeah, I did think that was interesting as well when I read it, that it's like, again, they don't really kind of give a whole lot. I mean, there's some other stuff that's like, you know, skilled with the spear and some other things, but like it almost, as you said, it felt like they were the council. You know what I mean? Like they just kind of, they had, like you said, had some wisdom or some discernment that I don't think I'd ever really associated with the tribe of Issachar.
Yeah.
You know, in any way.
You don't
like,
hear them much.
yeah, they're kind of a, I won't say anonymous tribe, but they're just kind of like just a tribe.
Yeah, we're
You know
there.
what I mean? Yeah. We don't really get much from them kind of throughout history. So I did think that was a very interesting footnote. Yeah. But okay. We go into chapter 13. And in chapter 13, we get a story that, again, we've heard before, right? As many of these will be as we kind of go through Chronicles here. And it is David again, or not again. This is the first time through this reading, but the second time for us reading this, attempts to bring the Ark of the Covenant to his city. And if we recall from the reading before, he runs into a challenge with that. It doesn't quite work out in his favor. And unfortunately, someone loses a life in the process of trying to do that. But anything that you thought was particularly interesting in this particular version of it in chapter 13, as he attempts to bring the ark to his city?
I don't know if this actually was said before in Samuel's when we was recounting this, but verse 3, where it says, "Let us again bring the ark of our God to us, for we did not seek it in the days of Saul." And then it was just interesting that it was kind of like, in the days of Saul, we didn't do, but now we about to bring this ark here and inquire of the Lord our God here, because of course, at certain times, he said like Saul either relied on Samuel, he relied on mediums, he relied on, himself,
Yeah.
and the Ark of God was more so kind of like a trophy kind of thing that like was stunted out.
Yeah.
Like, we're gonna bring it out so we can win, but not really like the relationship of like we're asking our God like and inquiring of Him, like with a genuine heart. So I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a good point. I don't know. I mean, I think we know enough from Saul's story that he wasn't inquiring of the Lord in that way. But yeah, I do think it's interesting that it is almost as if David's like, we're gonna do this the right way going forward. And he intentionally tries to do it. So yeah, I mean, for that reason, it seems like he's doing it for a good reason. But as we will discover here, like, even doing like the right thing for the right reason in the wrong way has consequences, right? Like, and again, he is trying to bring it to the city so they can do good and inquire of the Lord. But as we'll find out really in chapter 15, which is kind of on Monday's reading, but we find out that the big issue is they don't include the Levites, which was kind of part of the original law in that, and I think you pointed that out even when we read it in Samuel. But that, like, because they don't do it the right way, they did the right thing for the right reasons, but they did it in the wrong way. Ultimately, Uzzah loses his life, right? Like, he tries to catch the ark as it's falling, as it's stumbling, and it wasn't even like their fault. It didn't even like they dropped it. It's like, what was it, the oxen? Somebody one was like one of the animals stumbled, and then it falls, and as a result of it, he ends up dropping dead because he touches it trying to hold it up. So,
and I just feel like this can't be a coincidence, right? Like that the Lord allowed it to happen in this way. Because like you said, they probably would have never learned or even went back to look at like how are we supposed to even deal with the ark or handle the ark and like in the right way. Because like I said, I think in his heart and his mind, he was like, I'm gonna get a new cart, right? I'm gonna get a new cart, I'm gonna have these people, we're gonna have some music, and we're gonna, and it's like they take it their way. But like if the ox never stumbled, I just feel like that was
I'm about to say, you think the Lord tripped the ox?
I feel like an angel had his foot out, and just no, for real, right? Like if this ox
That's
never
rude. That's rude.
But you can't blame nobody, right? At this point, you can't blame nobody.
Angel out here sticking his foot out, trying to trip the oxen. Oxen ain't do nothing.
I'm just saying. But I think if it never did, they wouldn't have learned. Like, you're doing this the wrong way.
And I get you. That's true. That's facts.
You think I'm going too far?
No, I mean it could be. I think you're what you're saying in the event of just like they obviously learned from this. I absolutely agree with. Who caused the accident trip? I don't know. The Lord is sovereign. He is in control. And so we've seen him talk to donkeys and other stuff along the way. So, it's not impossible for him to have done that. But I just think that's funny to kind of add that into it. But yeah, they do learn. They learn it's not the way. Now, David gets upset ultimately. Like, he's upset at the Lord.
Yeah.
And like names the whole place after. Like, even gives it a name because of it. But he came out of it afraid. Yeah. Right? Like,
but isn't that what we do though? Like, stuff happens in our life and we be like upset at God, but then like we look hindsight and be like, oh, it was my fault. Like, oh, it was me.
Yeah.
Like, the Lord actually was doing the right thing the whole time.
Yeah.
I was the one out of line. Oh, okay, my bad.
Yeah. So, like I said, I mean, it works out, I guess, ultimately, except for Uzzah. I hope he has some sons.
Yeah.
But Yeah, and then before we go into 14, we've pointed this out in Samuel, but just in case, it was interesting. Verse 14 is just always so crazy. The ark remains in Obed Edom's family,
Mm-hmm.
and he was so blessed for those 3 months that he had it, right? That, like, obviously everybody knew, like,
Yeah.
he was super blessed,
Yeah.
but everybody kind of noticed it, in only 3 months. So
Yeah.
I think Samuel gives us a couple more verses on it, and talks a little bit more about it, but I didn't think that was interesting, but. So chapter 14, we see King Hiram of Tyre, who essentially starts to bless David, offer him certain things to help him. And then, we get to hear about his wives and all sorts of other stuff. Just kind of hear how David is doing. Anything that just jumps out to you in 14, kind of these first few verses before we get to the Philistines.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like in verse 2 it's saying David knew that the Lord had established him as king over Israel, right? And exalted him and stuff. So he sees these blessings himself, right?
Yeah.
But then it's another thing for kings from afar to see this as well, right? And so I think it's interesting that kings are acknowledging it, David knows it, and then here we go into even when they talk about the blessings, the next thing that they say is children. And it wasn't just about riches or the battles he's won or all that stuff, what his palace looks like. It just went and he was highly exalted for the sake of his people, and he had more wives and children.
Yeah. I will say this is convenient. It's convenient for me to see all the children as a blessing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now that we headed to 5, I'm yeah, I'm blessed. The Lord has blessed me. He must find favor on me. Obviously, if we only had 1 or 2, I'd be like, ain't a big a deal. Blessings come in all sorts of shapes, and sizes. But it is real. I mean, that's constantly. We've seen that even back to Abraham. That was always seemed to be the missing blessing, quote unquote, right? Was the thing of sons and children. And we'll see that as we get to some of what Solomon teaches us in Proverbs, right? It is interesting that you said that it wasn't just riches and wealth, but it's sons.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like you're about to say something, add something to that.
Well, I was just thinking when we were talking about Obed Edom, and I was like, well, Lord, how can we see that he was so blessed in 3 short months? I'm not understanding how this happens. And I was thinking for us, well, we've been here for a few years. How do we know if the Holy Spirit isn't dwelling in our homes, right? And God is present with us as if the Ark of the Covenant is here with us. How do we know that we are blessed, right?
All these babies.
Then we say this. Then we get to the fact that we just see our baby.
Yeah, I mean, not just us. I'm just saying, don't sit on our couch.
Yeah, okay? And those all around us.
You spend too much time in our house.
You get pregnant
too.
By your husband and spouse.
Yeah. In the right way.
You gotta clarify.
Get married and then get pregnant.
Folk don't know us, so we gotta clarify.
That's facts.
If you come here with your spouse and go back to your own house.
That's facts. You should clarify.
Yeah, we gotta clarify for folk. They know what type of church.
Yeah. That's real. It's not a cult.
No.
But yeah, that is real. There's definitely something in the water, or it's a blessing in the spirit. Something
close.
But that's hilarious. Well, David was blessed. And he had a bunch of sons. And maybe Obed Edom did too.
It only takes 3 months probably back then to realize you was pregnant.
It's probably about right. Yeah.
It was probably ooh, kick, what?
Yeah, probably about right.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that wasn't the only blessing. He also had favor in war, right? And so, the Philistines come to attack him. He asked the Lord, and it's I'll hand him over to him. And so, he defeats them. Specifically, anything else you saw was interesting in just the blessings that God kind of gave them, and some of what they recognized?
I appreciate verse 17 that that the fame of David went out to all the lands, and the Lord brought the fear of him upon all nations. And that's something just like only the Lord can do, right? So,
yeah. Like I said, people seem to know his name, which is a beautiful thing, right? Like you said, and it's best. It doesn't always work this way, unfortunately, but it's best when like that's the result of like your devotion to God, right? And like your devotion to him, your love for him, and you're living for him and doing for him is what ultimately people know about you and know of you, right? Is that you're favored, right? And that you're blessed. And so, yeah, I mean, so that's if anybody ever knows my name, I hope it's that they just know that the Lord has blessed us. You know what I'm saying? Like, or that there's favor. And it's just that the Lord is with us, more than anything else. Which I think was what they knew about David.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, any last minute thoughts?
Nope.
Before we bring the week to a close? Okay. Well, appreciate you guys joining us this week. Again, thank you to Shay, who was a part of this conversation most of this week as well with Victoria, out in the Dallas, Texas area. But grateful for you guys joining us this week. Again, pray that this was encouraging and something that would be helpful to you. But yeah, come back and join us on Monday as we pick up at chapter 15, and definitely look forward to continuing this conversation, bringing First Chronicles to a close next week. But until then, take care.
Thank you for joining us for the VIBEZ Daily podcast. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, or download our favorite, the VIBEZ Church app. Visit vibes.church/devoted for additional episodes, notes, details, and the latest merch. Join us next time as we continue our journey through the Bible. Take good care.